What's up, everyone? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Sakyan. Very excited to be talking about optimizing health through precision medicine. We have Doug Jamison joining us on the show. Hello.
Hello, how are you doing today? Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming on.
Oh, no, my pleasure. Thank you.
Excited. Shout out to Steve for introducing us. Steve Waite, greatly appreciate the intro. Yeah, this is how we remember who makes those intros that we were talking about earlier. We shout them out at the beginning of the show. Doug's background: Doug is the CEO and founder of HALE.life. You can check out the link in the bio. They're currently reimagining primary care medicine. And this is going to be a lot of fun to talk about. I'm super excited. We have a bunch of good visuals to show you guys and unpack what the future looks like here. I'm excited. Let's start with a big history take on civilization. We like to start that way. So we find ourselves now as stewards of Earth after a long period of evolution. We're kind of getting into the exponential technology age with all this data now, as we're going to talk about. So what's your current take on humanity?
I mean, I'm a little worried, to say the least. I think that a lot of great minds have talked about being on the back half of the chessboard, where technology is really expanding rapidly, and I spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, the human ability to adapt to all that change. And I think that we're probably, you know, technology is moving faster than our ability to adapt, and I think you see that in a lot of world events currently, and so one has to do a lot of thinking as far as what happens when you're on that backside of the chessboard. And again, I mean, we talk about synthesizing history. What does that mean for, you know, you and your career and your job and what you need to do, what training you'll need for the future? What does it mean for raising kids in this period of time as well? So.
Yeah, I'm glad that you took us there, because we frequent this conversation on the show of, we now have 8 billion of us on this rock, and we have all these exponential technologies that are now entering into our daily lives. And how do we handle this? How do we do a collective conversation about how to best deal with the next steps for humanity? So what do you think on, like, how do we balance that we are one mentality with this geopolitical leadership thing?
I don't know. I mean, I probably the best description I've heard, and that I tend to agree with, is that you have sort of two evolutions going on, right? You have this biological evolution. We all have to, you know, we're all subject to biological evolution. It happens at a very, very slow pace. Right? Yet, I mean, I think they call it the cognitive revolution, whereby humans, unlike any other species, learn to tell stories, right? And that's what we do. That's what we do every day. Running a company is about crafting, creating, and telling a story. Life is about telling a story. We've talked about Yuval Harari, right? Which is, you know, he would actually say money is a story, right? Empires and civilizations are stories. Religion is a story. So we craft these stories all the time, and that ability skyrockets. It moves a lot faster. And yet we sort of have to balance these two conflicting ideas of, you know, our biological evolution, the fact that we're tribal, right, with our sort of psychological evolution, which has allowed us to create these incredible, you know, empires that we do in these communities much larger than evolutionary we ever did, as we lived in, you know, hunter-gatherer tribes and things like that. So I think, you know, I constantly try to synthesize, you know, how to balance those two effects. And I think as humans, you know, we struggle with that, right? The stories work so well until they don't. And then, you know, we have a major sort of step back, and then then someone crafts a new story and they come up. And I think that, I think what we need to do is just first realize that we have to balance the biology with, I guess I'd call it the sort of psychology, right, or the cognitive revolution, and understand that balance far better if we're going to be able to, again, live in the age of accelerating technologies.
Yes. Yeah, because the biology is surely moving at much slower rates than the exponential technologies that are now in our pockets. And so yeah, we're seeing a big shift in many ways to doing things like keeping the phone off for extended periods of time, doing things like going on long periods of retreats, or really just exploring other ways of getting back to this empathy, looking at each other in the eyeballs, expressing love and care and compassion, even though someone's opinions may be different than yours.
True, true. I mean, consciousness is a wonderful human trait, right? And so how do you develop consciousness, right? We all talk about computers and intelligence, but intelligence and consciousness are two different things, right? Joy, compassion, empathy are very much consciousness. Super intelligence is the ability to solve problems, extremely difficult problems or problems rapidly. So, yes, it's an interesting world. How do you find balance in that? There's an upside. I said at the beginning, I'm worried, but the other thing is the beauty of humans is those stories. So, right, if we can craft the right type of stories that perhaps better balance sort of what's going to happen biologically, I think we're in a good place. The question is who's got control of those storylines? I read a great book once. Probably the most influential book I've ever read is called The Origins of Wealth. And I believe that Steve, who we mentioned at the beginning, was the person that put me onto it. It basically looks at the world as a complex adaptive system. It's written, the first third of it is all about the downside of economic theory, how wrong they got it. The back half of it is all about how simple patterning, mathematical tiling patterns, basically create these elaborate worlds. But in it, there's this great statement about, it talks about game theory, right? And we know the outcomes of game theory now, right? Collaborate is the best outcome that you could have.
Is a beautiful thing.
Is cooperate. Yet they've played these things out in computer algorithms now, and why don't we all collaborate? And there's a certain, I'll define it this way. There's a certain percentage of the population, just natural population, that is, in that book it was termed sociopathic, right? Some on the spectrum of sociopathy, some way, right? And I heard it defined by a gentleman, E.O. Wilson, great naturalist from Harvard, as there's always this battle going on between sort of, evolution at the individual level, the selfish gene and things like that, and evolution at the group level. Of course, he was a great entomologist, studied ants throughout his career, and the socialness of ants and how they get things done. And clearly, same concept. We do better if we cooperate in groups. However, you're better off within the group if you're the selfish one, right? So my guess is, biologically, mathematically, there's sort of this equilibrium of what percentage of us can operate selfishly and still have the group work, right? And again, societies and history, we've gotten so far as humans by cooperating, but there's an element that is, that is sort of the selfish element underneath that. And so in game theory, what ends up happening oftentimes is cooperate, best outcome. Next best outcome. If you're cooperating, the other party's not cooperating, is what? Punish harshly. So when Putin invades Ukraine, NATO should just line up at the border and say, take one more step and we're blowing you to oblivion, right? That is the next best outcome. The far worse outcome is to appease the person that's not collaborating. And I always just think of life as this constant battle. You hear it talking about it, but this constant battle between like the selfish and the group of playing that out, whether it's game theory, whether it's sort of, the social good, whether it's cooperation and storytelling versus being selfish. And, you just sort of wish that we could, I don't know, get rid of that part of society and get to cooperate.
Yes.
And we'd have a far better outcome for the world.
It feels like the more that our ethics evolve, the further they evolve, the further we get closer towards the ability to all harmoniously collaborate and also have our own individual interests at the same time, just mesh with that collaborative spirit simultaneously, that we both realize that the individual's prospering, that the individual is actualizing, meanwhile the collective is doing it at the same time. All right, let's do the journey. Let's do the journey on how on how Doug Jamison got to where he is today now, optimizing health and human performance. Let's talk about this.
Okay, so I'll step back away because Doug Jamison started as a very focused individual and then somehow got lost in what he wanted to do and then sort of found himself again. So I guess it's the classic coming of age story, right? I grew up, I basically went to college to dive, like swimming and diving, springboard and tower diving. That's what I did.
Where was this at?
I went to Dartmouth College.
Dartmouth.
I trained with
this is the big, tall.
Yeah, towers. So
towers.
Yeah.
We're talking like you're diving 30 feet.
Yeah, 30 feet is exactly correct, yes.
Holy cow, what a good way to shatter your uncomfortabilities.
Yeah. Leap off one of those towers and start spinning and hope you hit the water well.
I hope you hit the water right. Yeah.
Which doesn't always happen. But
man.
Yeah, so I was a springboard diver and a tower diver. Went to college. I trained with the national team out of University of Texas at every opportunity away from Dartmouth. So competed at a very high level. Went to school, I sort of somewhere in high school they taught me economic motivation is paramount in man, and I think at my young age I truly believed it, and so I was going into economics and going that classic route. And the beauty of a liberal arts education is you find out there's a lot more to it. So I did a lot of math and physics early on. I found Asian studies. I wrote my senior thesis on agricultural reformation in pre-Han China, which is 200 BC and the unification of China, so very different than when I came in. Dove through college, trained seriously, but I left college and I didn't want to go the traditional routes. So I literally wrangled on a ranch in Evergreen, Colorado for a summer with a buddy. Beautiful, I'd ridden horses, so we did that. I did, if you know Boulder County at all, I actually did the first economic analyses of whether it made more sense to outright purchase the land or do conservation easements. So this is in the early 90s when those conversations were going on, big in Boulder, which purchased all the land around Boulder to protect it. And so I did put my college degree, my economics, to work for a short period of time. And then all my friends that seemed incredible, they whitewater raft, they climbed mountains, they scaled rocks at Yosemite. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, so I fled west, and I decided to do graduate work and coached the University of Utah diving team. So I kept going with one thing I did know how to do, which was dive and coach and train that. So I coached there and did graduate work. And I did, they paid for all my education. So I ended up I had a physics major, and then I had economics and Asian studies. I went on and did a geology undergraduate. I did biochemistry undergraduate, and I did my graduate work in economics and mathematical statistics, and spent that time there. So just fast forwarding, I ended up in technology transfer, but I still ran this elite program coaching springboard diving in Utah, and ended up coaching, doing a lot across the state, ran the state programs, run younger programs, but I ran an elite program as well where divers came through and became junior national finalists, national finalists. We sent 2 athletes to the Athens Olympics from the program. So coaching at that higher level, which will come back when we talk about HALE sports.
It's all making sense.
Yeah, so it's all going to circle through, not linearly, but and do that. But so I ended up in tech transfer, which is commercializing university technologies. You work with professors, you take their technologies, you basically work with patent attorneys to patent that, and then you're looking for licensing. I did that at the University of Utah. It was a great place to do technology transfer, very entrepreneurial university and tech transfer office. And after doing that for about 5 or 6 years, I didn't have a PhD, and I lived my life with a whole bunch of PhDs, and I figured the only way I was going to get ahead was to find an area that one PhD wouldn't cut it. And it was the rise of nanotechnology. So looking at matter below the micrometer level at the nanoscale, and I got heavily involved. That's the portfolio I managed at University of Utah. Did a lot. I figured, one PhD in materials science wasn't going to cut it for all the life science applications, electronics and engineering applications, and did that. And lo and behold, through a friend, it's always through mentors and friends and people you work with, I got introduced to a venture capital firm in New York City, Harris & Harris Group, who had just changed their entire investing focus to investing only in companies enabled at the nanoscale. And the concept was, we could diversify the industries we invested in, because there's nanoscales for biology, for electronics and engineering, as well as energy, yet we could have a focus, because you really needed a focus to hire great talent. And I joined there in 2001, and went on from, I don't think they wanted to hire me. They were looking for, PhD, MBA, and they got me. But I was the guy early on that believed in the ability of it, and I ended up being chairman and CEO of it in 2009 and ran it through 2017 when I restructured it and founded HALE.
Whoa, yeah. 16 years?
So 16 years.
Harris
Group. Yeah, long venture.
All nanotech across different fields.
So you evolve as a business, right? Yeah. So we did a lot of nanotechnology, and that we always did nanotechnology through 2017. We went from a generalist firm to doing only life sciences in the last 3 or 4 years, and we even, in the life sciences, with a lot that was changing in the capital markets, especially the microcap public market, for which I wrote a book on venture investing in science, sort of documenting all of those changes, that was published by Columbia University Press. We ended up moving away from the drug deals to precision medicine, really, which is, the tools and everything. And there were good reasons for it. There was, the markets were changing drastically. So microcap markets, which really drove venture capital from the 1970s onward. Remember, Harris Group, the firm I joined, started in 1983. So, I mean, longer time frame of a venture firm than almost all the firms that exist today. And we were also a public company. We were publicly traded, so we had permanent capital during that period of time. So you weren't raising a fund, it wasn't an LPGP structure. Makes you think a lot, being a public company, of what to do. But basically the markets had changed. The microcap market had been decimated. There were no market makers. The idea of taking a company public at $200 to $300 million and letting it grow in the public sphere disappeared. Now they're all billion-dollar companies. And if you're a $200 to $300 million market cap company, it's rough. And yet for venture capital, $300 to $400 million funds, which is effectively what Harris Group became, they went from being 60% of all the venture capital companies in America to less than 15%. I think it's down from there. So either you became very small, doing internet type deals, or you became very, very large, billion-dollar funds, so that you could write the checks you needed to stay private longer. And Harris couldn't do that, which is one of the reasons I restructured it, doing it. But so we evolved in a marketplace where you're public, because it's not about your last deal, right? I mean, Harris Group was in a great position. We had enough money coming in through sales and IPOs each year to fund our operations, to make new investments, and to make follow-on investments. But when you're a public company, you start thinking about compounding your growth rate and growing assets and growing them in comparison to other companies in the marketplace. And that became really difficult to do. So the moment you have a great exit, you turn $5 million into $40 million, your shareholders don't go, great, I'm giving you 3 years off, make some other investments, I hope things go well. They go, what are you going to do for me today? And that's a much tougher world. So
I think a lot of time we don't necessarily look behind the veil of some of the things that happen in investing. And so when we see companies that are impacting us on a daily basis in the things that we do and the services that we have provided to us, sometimes it's actually always, I think, really important to look behind the veil and see exactly how these companies became how they did. And in many times it is these really important investments that came through from people that believed in the founding team, that believed in the science, that believed in what they were doing. So, and it also makes sense now with your deep science background, as well as the diving as well with the sports. This kind of gets us to HALE.life and HALE Sports as well. So let's venture into what happened, in 2017. So teach us about like that aha moment, and then what happened with HALE.life.
Yeah, so it's never an aha moment. It's probably a series of moments, and and sort of, I think it's best described sort of in aspirations, where you're thinking about, well, what do I want to do and what do we need to become? And being chairman and CEO of a public company, you spend a lot of time strategically thinking, about your business, about what you do you do it well, everything. And so we, if you step back to really 2007, one of the things that drove me and I think us as a firm at Harris & Harris Group was you had the rise of genomics, and we were involved in that in the 90s as venture capital and everything. But we started looking and saying, okay, that's big now. It's being played out in the public sphere. Illumina's a public company, big dollars going in. But what's the other information we need beside it? So you have genotypic information, but it's often called phenotypic information, but what is the environmental side of the nature-nurture equation, right? And what if we not only had your genomic blueprint, but we knew things like proteomics, epigenomics, microbiome. We knew what was happening, sort of 360-degree view. Could we actually understand what was happening biologically or health or medically? And we started looking at that and say, well, look, if you look at the rise of genomics, all these other technologies are probably going to lag, but they're going to come right beside it. And even if they're smaller, there's still a wonderful growth opportunity to be investing in those companies. And so we started investing in the precision medicine space, the epigenetic companies, the microbiome companies, the metabolomic companies, all of the other omics out there. And so fast forward a set of years, and having looked at those, I started to say, wow, these technologies are finally ready for prime time. We've watched these companies grow up. The technologies are ready for prime time, but they're either being used in research at universities who are buying these services, these technologies, or like stage 4 cancer, right? So if you look at cancer research now, it's incredible, right? You look at immuno-oncology, right? Using your own immune system to fight it. And they found out that not only do cancer tumors mutate, so you want to look at the sequencing of the genes constantly, but you also found out that actually your microbiome, the microbes in your gut, impact how well you'll respond to those diseases. And so you see this coming together, but it's like stage 4 cancer where you'll get a team and do that. And I started asking the question of, why can't we use the same technology ready for prime time and start asking questions like, if my health is here now, what trajectory am I on for the next 10 years or 20 years? And again, I got older in that period of time. I'm 49, so you start to ask the question, in 20 years, when my kids are graduating from college, am I going to be healthy? Am I going to be like my own personal uncle who's 72 and bikes 70 miles on the weekend with my wife and I? Or am I going to be like my father who has a flippy-flop foot, has trouble walking, needs a stick and everything like that? And those are two different life trajectories. And so you start saying, how can we use this information to give us sort of prescriptive, proactive healthcare? And that finally, after sort of working through that, trying to convince companies that they should go a more consumer route in medicine, finally was like, look, we can do this. Let's just take this and go to the consumer. Let's start HALE.life and see if we can take these technologies and use them to reimagine primary care, to help people optimize their health and athletes optimize their performance.
It was so crucial that you came in that 2007-ish time when you were watching the initial follow-up omics develop, not the genomics, but the proteomics and the epigenomics and all these other omics that are microbiome, all of these different developing technologies that are now able to give us this blueprint of our environment as well as the nature, the nurture and the nature together, which is super interesting that it is now finally at the time where you're able to make these relevant insights into people's lives that there's, like you said, it's a bifurcation of your life potentially where you can end up like a super healthy biking when you're 70, like you feel powerful when you're waking up and stuff, versus when you're feeling not great at 50 even. And so this is all extremely valuable because the health that we have, it's the creativity that we have, it's the livelihood that we have as we move forward in our lives. So, all right, so now you're finding yourself making this basically this engine. So teach us about, like, we have some good visuals too to pull up as well that will help us kind of walk through this. But teach us about this engine and kind of like you illustrated this out.
Let's start here.
Let's do it.
So again, I mean, you saw just sort of my history as this developed, and again, probably someone far smarter than I would have put all of this together a lot faster than I did. I mean, it built for a period of time, but basically, we're entering the age of consumer medicine. People know that, investors know that, everybody's trying to play that in one way or another. So that was one of the ideas. The other idea goes all the way back to college. So I got lucky at Dartmouth, and I did a lot of system dynamics work. It was early system dynamics work done out of MIT and done out of Dartmouth that started looking at, system level. Right? And probably one of the best things about not being a PhD scientist myself is I'm not stuck in, what do you do when you do a PhD? You basically become what scientists become, which are reductionists, right? You pick an area and you understand it 5, 6, 7, 8 layers deep. And that's what we've done in science. It's been a wonderful. I mean, the scientific revolution is about reducing things and understanding them. But once you reduce them all down, we're systems as humans, right? We don't, you don't operate all individually, right? You don't hit one in serial manners. We operate as a system, right? And I think that nanotechnology was the beginning of looking at how, at the nanoscale, biologically inert molecules become not inert, right? Things happen at that cross discipline. So I lived that in nanotechnology. I believed it from my college days, designing stocks and flows and watching information. You want to watch the information flows, right? The stock doesn't tell you anything. Follow the money flows, not the stocks. Following the flows tell you where things are going to happen. And so my view of the human sort of biology has always been system level. So that's not medicine. Medicine is reactive. It's symptom-based. I have a symptom, I have to solve it. You have a well-defined disease state. It's very reductionist, right? But we're not. We're complex, holistic, systems, and we're adaptive. And sometimes we get ourselves in these weird states, right? And how do we get out of that? And I think that what HALE is doing and what a lot of even medicine is starting to do in biology is building up from the reductionist back to the system level and trying to understand that. And really, that's at the heart of HALE. So what do we do at HALE? We basically look at a lot of comprehensive information with the idea that not only your blueprint, your genes, but
let's show that, so we can actually we'll go to the next one. And so here's kind of
so basically you have all of this information available to you, precision medicine data, that's all your omic information, but nowadays you have performance data, you have all these wearables you can collect information from, you have traditional medical data. For the athletes, we'll talk about it, we have performance data, we put them on force plates and can measure things. And again, the world doesn't need more data. Right? The world needs
to make sense of
the data. That's where value lies, making sense of the data. And so what we build is an engine, and we build an engine that ingests all this different type of information. It collects it, it organizes it, normalizes it, it curates it in the language. And then what we look to do is interrogate it and integrate it. So the idea is, your genes give you a blueprint, but what's happening in your environment that's going to impact turning on and off those genes, right? What's happening, with microbes in your gut? There's more cells of microbes in your body than human cells, right? You're more microbe than you are human, right? So what's happening there that impacts things? And the gut microbes impact what's happening not just in the immune system and inflammation, they impact all the thought processes as well. That gut to brain connection is very, very close from our evolutionary days when we were worms. And so we look at all that together, and the idea is to integrate it, to be able to tell you in a more holistic, 360-degree way what is happening. And the idea is if we can do that, you can then start to think about what do I need to do to optimize health. And I'll give you a classic example. Again, you start thinking how dumb you are sometimes, which is every year I worked 17 years at Harris National. We had a great medical plan, right? We had anything you wanted. So I went and get a physical every year, right? Do you know in like 16 years of physicals, never once did they put up the year data, the year prior's data next to this year's. I never saw a line.
A chart.
I never saw longitudinal information. I was lucky if they even called me back to tell me what my test results were. I never saw that. Never once did I see a doctor that said...
It's such a mistake to not see longitudinal biometric data.
Yeah, the whole concept of HALE is there's a lot of population data in there that's interesting, but the whole idea is longitudinal data. We can start to see what's happening. We can think about optimization because we can look at that longitudinal data. But no one ever looked longitudinally. No one ever said to me, Doug, here's where you are today. Here's where you were yesterday. Here's the slope of the line, right? Your glucose levels are going up. Your HbA1c are going up. You know, you're clearly sedentary. Your weight's going up. And we can plot that line out because they can do this. And we can tell you when you're going to be pre-diabetic and diabetic. No one ever said that. They just said, you're fine. You know, yeah, you put on a little weight, eat a little less, exercise a little more. But you could map that out, right? And my belief is that, you know, you'll have the early movers that as soon as they hear it, they'll take changing action.
You can even see the breaking points where when you're, you know, 5 years from now is when there'll be a breaking point where you'll actually feel it inside of you.
So you know that. It can motivate behavior, but you never saw that. So the whole concept
is... And then you can see your line go do-do-do, and your health can potentially increase when you make these changes as well. This is,
So that's the concept, which is, so even just collecting it and storing it so you can look at it longitudinally, I believe has value. And it's not done. It's done in an EMR, but you can't get information out of the EMR as an individual patient, or if you move healthcare systems or anything like that. And I think they say if you're over 60, you're in probably 5 different healthcare systems, none of which really share information at this point in time. So one of the ideas of HALE is it's this platform that is portable, that allows you to hold that information.
How do you guys take EMR as well as how the data is coded from wearables and how it's coded from all the omics sets, and how do you actually run that through your engine?
It's fairly straightforward. I mean, we collect it all, you know, the microbiome data. I mean, we collect it in the forms of data that it comes through. And in the wearables, you know, we use APIs to be able to pull that data in and look at it. We clearly define what we want to look at. So, you know, different wearables have different things they look at. For our model, at least originally, we're very interested in sleep. We're interested in sleep stability.
Oh, yeah, you age way more when you sleep 6 hours a night instead of 8.
Yeah. So, and we look at that information beside the genes, right? So I have a genetic predisposition. I have a rare variation where I need less sleep than the general population to get full recovery. There's 3 variations. You know, only 8% of the population has one of 2, actually 10% of the population has one of 2 variations. There's a 2%, 8% that predispose you to needing less sleep for recovery. 90% of the population needs 7 to 8 hours. And then there's genes that predispose you to more restless sleep. And so we look at that with your sleep. We look at stability of it, because stability of when you go to bed, when you wake up, how that cycle is working is super important. And then we look at recovery scores. We look at REM and deep sleep. Is your body getting the intellectual recovery it needs? Is it getting the physical recovery and deep sleep that it needs? And look at that. And then you can look at clinical markers. You can look at something like C-reactive protein and look at inflammation in the body and how is your body responding to potential inflammation. If you bring that all together, you just get a much better picture of what's happening with your health.
You must have lots of data scientists and engineers that work on the team.
So we do. We have, it breaks up into, you know, you have your classic Python coders building the engine. Then you have a set of UI, UX of how you're going to present this information, because presenting it's very important.
Of course.
And then you have the data scientists, right? And our data scientist team is led by a gentleman I think you've interviewed, Murray Cantor, a Bayesian neural network expert, but is how do we look at this information? So to give you an idea, you know, we've piloted over 150 athletes, and of those athletes, they all have a different microbiome, but they cluster into 4 different microbiomes, some of which you read the literature and you expect. There's a few you don't read or see about, and it tends to cluster in the elite endurance athletes, national Ironman triathletes, people, you know, competing in Kona and places like that have a microbiome that's very different, but very, very supportive of turning fiber into short-chain fatty acids, protecting your colon, so during intense exercise, things don't leak through, get into your blood, immune response, inflammation. And so they tend to have much lower inflammation, even though they're doing a super intense sport.
Something we don't think about a lot. Different demographics from around the world have different environments that they live in, different foods they eat, different temperatures they're in, different amounts of sunlight, different amount of exercise that is naturally applicable in their community, etc. This is this is very interesting that you also, of course, you need the right ways of displaying the information to users after you're crunching it and making it relatable to them. Okay, so now the application, the immediate, like HALE.life's immediate application is through sports right now.
So I didn't come to it through sports. So in 2016, was the very beginning, looking at all this, I said, and it was interesting, I was talking to a woman at a conference who was a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker, and she was doing a film on undiagnosed medical refugees. And the idea was that you had these people that had undiagnosed diseases. They had been through the medical community. They had medical records that were like, thicker than books, and no doctor would see them or look for them, and they could never understand what was wrong. And a lot of it was chronic diseases. And the woman I was talking to, a gentleman at Harvard, Isaac Kohani, had worked with Illumina, and they had sequenced, and they'd done full genome sequencing of this population for the film, and were tracking them. But there were no new hypotheses for most of these people, even after the full genome sequencing. So in talking to her, said, well, have you tried all of these other technologies out there, right? That none of them by themselves may solve it. By looking at all this information together, we might get new hypotheses. And she said, no, it'd be wonderful, but it's so hard to do. It was, it took us a year to get, the sequencing. I said, well, I know all these groups. So we basically said, let's set up the Undiagnosed Disease Consortium, UNDX Consortium, and let's see if we can get these companies, these research centers, to work with there was only 8 people in that population to do this work. And we did that. We did all the data collection. We got the groups to do it. We presented it in August of 2016. So we got to see it in real time, and new hypotheses came about. And I said, wow, it's ready for prime time. So I came in through undiagnosed disease. As we got into HALE.life, thinking about medicine, you end up in all the insurance issues. And so we started thinking, say, what's a population that are influencers, that are early adopters, that probably are fairly healthy, which is good, right? I mean, even from our own insurance perspective. And now they call them optimal population, which would be a great base, if you look at these athletes, then how do people move off of that as they age? So we came to sports and athletes, and my life came 17 years later, came full circle back to athletics, which I never expected to happen, but I love it.
Which is awesome, because then you're even more precisely in the right role for this.
To do it. So we said, why not work with athletes? They're a great population, and they were wonderful. So we needed to get, not only do we need to build the platform, right, and see what we could integrate it, we also needed to get people on it and make sure we could do it. So we piloted, and the response from athletes was wonderful, right? I mean, I remember.
What was your pilot?
So we continue to pilot today. We've gone commercial, but we continue to pilot, because the more people you have on the platform, the more valuable the information across sports, across age groups, across ethnicities, right? Because a lot of this data is different depending on ethnicity and environment. And so we continue to pilot and doing that. But athletes, I didn't know.
Athletes are doing completely different things in football than they're doing in basketball or soccer, hockey, etc.
So very different sports, very different needs, everything like that. But diet is important for all of them. Recovery is important for all of them as well. So the idea of sports is, basically, if we give you regular performance plans derived from this data, can you use it to not only optimize performance, but reduce injury, make sure you're not out for a good portion of the season, right? So that recovery, you're able to compete more and everything like that. And that's the idea.
Peak performance longer.
Peak performance, longevity is a big part of what we do. A lot of people are interested in that subject today. Just reducing the chance of injury, which is what plagues so many athletes.
Yeah. You want to have a long and healthy. I mean, this really, when you made the example at the beginning of what it's like when you're 70 to be healthy and riding the bike for long periods of time versus, you just feel like you're crippled. And same thing with athletes when you're, 18. Sometimes the scenario is that you're done after like 6 years, like that's all you're going to play, because that's if you can get to 40 while being an athlete and having really strong health and making sure that you're crunching all this very valuable data in ways that are relatable.
How does Tom Brady, still a Super Bowl star, right, age 40? Right, Eli Manning, how long do they last in the league versus people that are out? I agree, I was sort of laughing because...
Cross sports too, A-Rod, others like LeBron James.
LeBron James is known for longevity, right? I mean, this is the first year he's probably struggling. Derek Jeter, a New York Yankee, was known for longevity in the sport. And if you look at their training programs and how they train, and they tend to be with functional doctors that don't look at symptoms, they look at root causes and approach it that way. So I was chuckling though, because commercially, we do, one of the areas we focus on commercially is with elite age group athletes, right? And you win on both sides. You have the crazy parents that want their kids' college scholarship to be professional, and they'll do anything, any information to get them there. And then you have the other subset of parents who are like, my son or daughter is really good, but they're training a lot. I want to make sure they don't blow out their shoulders freshman year of college and lose that opportunity to be part of that team, right? So you basically, you're looking at both sides of that. Same as health. Longevity, how can I stay this healthy? How can I make sure I don't end up with these diseases as well?
It's so insane, like you said, just the amount of data flow that we have right now and how we're finally making sense. The most important thing to do right now is to make sense of the data flows. And there's so many variables that go into this too, which makes it so crazy, because when you're 18 and when you're from a different part of the world versus when you're 38 and you're from a different part of the world, these are completely, different ages, different humans, all different biometrics across all of these different facets here. This, the way that you explain it, being so comprehensive across the different areas, all the way from sleep, all the way to microbiome. And it's just, to me, this is the way it has to be done. And to start making sense of it and chipping away at our ignorance with it is so crucial for everyone to eventually be able to live that life curve where they feel healthy throughout the entirety of their life.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because clearly we come from a system level. So don't just know one piece of information, but know multiple pieces of information. And it sounds beautiful when we're talking about interrogation and integrated plans. I mean, you realize the state of the art now is, no one has all of these data sets, right? There's people that have genes, right? There's hospital systems have clinical labs over years and years and years, but no one's really collected all of this different type of information, let alone looked at it. So we work with some of the leading research groups. We do work with Open Medicine Institute out of Mountain View, California, that came out of Stanford, groups that data engineers that can really look at this information, begin to integrate it. But I'd be lying if we told you, oh, we can pinpoint it. I think one of the beauties of what we're doing at HALE is we're basically setting up this platform that researchers are going to be able to come into and say, this is interesting. I want to look at someone that has these microbes and these percentages in their gut that have these gene variations and are showing up these clinical labs. And they can pull that information, look at it. And my hope would be they say, oh my gosh, here's something that you can use that then advances our state of the art. So let me back up a little bit. So what do we actually do? So for athletes, we look at 46 sports-related genes, right? So we tell you, one of 3 variations in these 46 genes. We look at 72 different clinical labs, everything from inflammation to muscle recovery to hydration markers to iron levels to all the hormonal balances and what impacts that. We look at the microbiome. So we're looking at nutrition, what you eat, what are the microbes in your gut? Are they pro-inflammatory? Are they diverse? And what the impact may be. We give all the athletes a wearable where we can track
sleep.
We can track sleep. We can track the different parts of sleep. So REM sleep, deep sleep, whether it's fitful or not, how many times you wake up in the night. But it also tracks activity and recovery.
heart rate.
And recovery. Heart rate variability is a big thing we tend to look at. And then for the athletes, we put them on a force plate. We can measure right leg, left leg dominance and balance characteristics in the feet, where they're generating force from, but we also can measure power measurements and different strength measurements, neuromuscular coordination, neuromuscular activation. So we're gathering all that information, and it basically, like this slide shows, goes into 9 different attributes that we characterize that mean a lot for sports. Now, if you move away from sports, energy levels, recovery, nutrition, mental preparedness, sleep are all impactful for myself in life as a non-athlete anymore as well. But these are the ones we look at for athletes to be able to report back on attributes that they think about, right? What is my recovery? What's my endurance? What's my power, you know, during an athletic season?
So right now in use, both pilots and in use, so explain it to us on a summary of where.
Yeah, so we built this platform. We are now commercializing it. So our primary markets on the commercial side are elite age group teams and programs. You know, the parents are still involved. They're paying for all of this. The kids need this information. It's a great time to track before they go to college.
So around like 16,
will go pro. So 16, 17, 18 into college. Then we also work with performance centers. So these aren't necessarily a team, but you know, elite athletes will go through these performance centers. So we work there. And the other area that we weren't planning on, but it just got a lot of interest through all the testing we're doing, is people just came up to us and said, I want this information for general health. I work with a trainer. Is it available? So we started working with some gyms and through the trainers that they can provide to people that they train. Similar to the performance center. So we do that commercially, but we want to keep getting people on the platform, so we pilot. So we've piloted some of the premier dancers at New York City Ballet. At Paul Taylor Dance Company, we're about to do Alvin Ailey, a big, you know, traditional African-American dance troupe, fantastic group out of New York City. A set of Major League and minor league baseball players all coming through Performance Center. In Atlanta, we've done triathletes, and we'll continue to pilot. There's another nice part we do. You know, again, the problem with a lot of healthcare and medicine is yes, the people that can afford this get the benefit. What about everybody else? And so I've always been a big believer in it. It's big in the world now of doing something socially as well. So I first started my diving career in a YMCA. When you think of YMCAs and YWCAs, now you don't think of elite, you think of them as sort of, you know, linchpins of communities, right? And a lot of times it's economically disadvantaged people that are still taking advantage of them. Other people might come through, but then go off to do elite select programs. So we're starting a program where for every 10 people, you know, athletes, et cetera, we test somebody through YMCA. There's still that sports connection in the YMCA, YWCA, but you get a different population that otherwise might not have this ability to do this testing, you know, ever, or until they were an elite level athlete.
That's great. That's actually going to take you even further, because there's a lot of millennials and Gen Z that are really following on to the mission statements of businesses as well, the social impact that they're going to have and whatnot. So the more that you can also work with the different clients that you have on helping them understand the principles of your mission, so that they can also potentially help along with the social impact. That's actually really big, and I think it'll take you definitely take.
And it's important. It's important in tech, because again, tech. You know, you see this pulling apart us. Back to the original questions, pulling apart of societies. Right, it's becoming less egalitarian, right? And there's a lot of forces driving that, and this is one in medicine and healthcare, right? Could be one. So it's a nice match to be able to do that, and it's also well within the confines of medicine. When concierge medicine started coming about, a lot of those concierge clinics did, you know, a certain percentage of their business with people that couldn't afford to pay for it, because it matched sort of the, you know, that, you know, what's the Hippocratic Oath or something, right? But providing healthcare to everyone. So there's a whole history of doing that in healthcare as well.
Where is this going in your vision, let's say in the next, you know, couple of decades, as this opens up more and more to all humans around the planet, and we're getting a constant stream of these insights about our biometric states? Where do you see this kind of going?
Yeah, so I mean, we're starting we're starting with sports. We did that because influence earlier adopters. I mean, a lot of commercial reasons, as well as a fundamental one, which is that's an optimal population. So it'd be great to have this type of data, both population data. So, how do I compare to 5,000 other college volleyball players, minor league or major league baseball players, or NFL football players?
What are the ones at the peak of their performance doing?
What do they look like? Can I, if I want to get there, what will it take? What do I need to do? By the way, that's fantastic behavioral motivation. The thing that lacks in medicine right now is the doctor says, eat less and exercise more, and then goes, you didn't do what I told you to do. You're like, there's no motivation there. And there's a lot of companies now working on behavioral change, but that's the best one, is like, I want to get there. What does LeBron James look like? But more importantly, longitudinally, looking at you. What do you do? When you're at your best performance, what is aligning in your body versus when you're feeling sluggish and things aren't going as well, and trying to get yourself into that top level position. But athletes are this optimal population. My belief still, it was the original sort of foundation from this when we created HALE.life, which was, optimizing health through performance medicine, right? Reimagining primary care medicine. I believe there's an incredible opportunity out there to basically take primary care medicine, where the doctors hate it, insurance 8 to 12 minutes, the doctors don't get to know their patients. They don't get to solve the problems of their patients. The patients hate it because they get 9 minutes in and they start telling the doctor all of their real symptoms, things happening, and the doctor has to leave. The doctors are working harder than they ever had for less reimbursement than they have ever had. And we're fighting chronic disease. The age of infectious disease, we've solved that. Chronic disease, 2/3 of the healthcare budget.
That's right.
Over $2 trillion you don't solve by giving someone a pill and sending them home. You'd solve it through behavioral changes. And so, to me, primary care has this opportunity to go, you got urgent cares, that'll go telemedicine, you need stitches, you got strep throat, go solve it. You got specialists, it'll always do what specialist does. But primary care physicians, why can't we be health coaches? And I have a bigger vision, which is, we have these gyms, we all go to the gym, right? We go to the gym, we go to massage therapists, we go to chiropractors, or anything like that. And all of that is, in some respects, outside the healthcare system, or at least fringing to the healthcare system. Why don't we actually have, if I was a primary care doctor, I'm gonna own a gym. And every day, people are gonna come 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 2 times a week to that gym. I'm gonna see them. What's happening? How are you feeling? I'm gonna test them. I'm gonna take 5 minutes out of their time one day, and I'm gonna test them, and another day when they come back, say, hey, spend 20 minutes with me. And it's just like your financial advisor. Let me show you your reports. Let's talk about this. What do you wanna do? What do you wanna focus on this year? And now
like
make it
an integrated health center that has all these components happening.
Components to it, and make it's prescriptive, it's proactive. Now you're collaborating with your physician, and the physician's running a health care. He gets to see you in the gym. Are you working out? What are you doing?
The behavioral changes that you're talking about too.
And I think there's a great opportunity to change it, and that's what you need to solve chronic disease. And it's easy because you can do it with data, and you can do it collaboratively. And you don't need the doctor running a gym. There's a billion different ways to do it. But basically, I think you can move it into that sphere. And now, primary care doctor, has meaning again, right? And
I love your vision. I love your vision, Doug. Your vision is really strong. It's really strong. This is why you've been spending the last 13 years now specifically even like on this.
I always joke. I went the opposite route, right? I went into venture capital. I got frustrated with venture capital because as it became institutionalized, the guys that are sitting on your board meeting and doing all talking, most of them have never run a business in their life. Right? Have no idea. They're probably answering to somebody else because everybody's answering to somebody else, and do that. And that's not what venture capital was in its prime, in its glory. And I finally looked at myself and I said, well, I run a company, but I run an investment company. Why don't I do this? So at age 48, said, I'm going to become the 25-year-old entrepreneur and see if I can really build a company.
And you had the insights from your life trajectory, especially in sport and across all of the sciences, that really put you in the right position here to be able to do this. And again, I really like your vision a lot. I think there's going to be a huge change in what's happening with all of this data, of making sense with all the data. I loved your vision of an actual, like a health center that actually has all these components built into it, and you're actually monitoring humans' biometrics and making sure they're, this is a totally futuristic vision, and I'm excited to see it come to fruition. I have 2 quick questions for you on the way out that we like asking our guests. First of all, it's simulation. Are we in a simulation?
You know, it's a question you always ask yourself. It's the Matrix, but you know, where they think they got out of it. Every time you're out of it, are you just in another simulation? I love that in the Matrix movie. I wish they had gotten into that. No, I mean, life is real, and all of the emotions and the passions of life are truly real, and I think that's the wonderful part of life. And I think when you step out of the simulation, and you can experience real life, and you can experience it in real time. I mean, you know this. I mean, you know, the fact that you're working really hard and doing all of that, but you realize what you're doing at the same moment. I mean, that to me is reality. So I'm a believer in reality. But I sometimes wonder if we're just tripping up new simulations.
And the last question is, what do you think is the most beautiful thing in the world?
What do I think is the most beautiful thing in the world? Man, I don't think it's a single thing. I think it's, you know, to envisioning something, an idea, right? Maybe it's even before that. Aspiration to idea to realization, right? I think that flow, that process, aspiration, idea, realization is, I mean, it's life. It's wonderful. When it happens, when you can make it happen, it's awesome. And when you can realize it's actually happening is the best thing in the world. I mean, it's all with athletes. The athletes that sort of, you know, you're in the Olympics, having the best competition in their life, and they're going on to do something no one has ever done, right? Aspiration, idea, I can be an Olympian, to the execution, I'm a gold medalist, I've done something that so few people have done, and understand it. Be part of it, live it while you're experiencing it. That to me is, that's awesome. I mean, that's the greatest thing in life.
Oh, I love it. There's everything that we see around us in civilization was this aspiration and then this idea and this realization of it into the world that we get the privilege of being able to use on these daily bases. And even when you fly, when you do all of these things, when you have these great medical treatments that prolong your life so long, like it's just so incredible what human creativity has been able to bring us to and accomplish. Doug, I really want to follow up soon, and you know, we have so much more to unpack about all of the nuance about the technology and about the biometric states of our bodies and having a long state of prosperity with our health. And I'm really excited to see where the engines and the insights are going with this. So thank you.
No, thank you. It's great to speak to a visionary that sees all this. Thank you very much.
You're the one. Good. This has been such a pleasure, Doug. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. We'd love to hear from your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know what you're thinking about what's happening in the state of transitioning to a more prosperous technology with our healthcare. Also, thank you to Ron Vargas for producing and directing. We would love for you to subscribe, join the community, join the conversations that we have going on. Also, keep supporting artists and entrepreneurs. Keep supporting the visionaries that you want to see their ideas come to reality. Remember to check out HALE.life's links below. And much love. Keep building the future. We'll see you guys soon. Peace.